So if you think Hellmuth is going to win more than 43% of the time, then you should be betting on Hellmuth. And there's a little bit of a house edge built in here so that the casino makes money. And that's how it goes. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, and I'm here today with a little poker report. We have some exciting news in the high stakes, heads up, ego-filled, drama-filled world, and that is that Daniel Negreanu is going to be playing Phil Hellmuth. Heads up, they're going to get in there, they're going to battle on PokerGO on High Stakes Duel. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to watch this epic battle happen. So, how did it happen? Well, if you've been living under a rock, Daniel Negreanu recently played a 25,000 long hand battle at 200-400 no-limit hold'em against high-stakes heads-up professional Doug Polk. And Daniel Negreanu got smashed. He lost $1.2 million and whatever other side bets he had on it. But, you know, to be fair, I know $1.2 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's only 30 buy-ins. 30 buy-ins is a lot and indicates he was a reasonable underdog to Doug Polk, but he didn't really completely embarrass himself. If he lost $4 million, then he'd be like, okay, yeah, he's bad at heads up. But 1.2 is at least reasonable against one of the best heads up players in the world. Fine. When Phil Hellmuth was asked about this match between Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu, he said, yeah, I was disappointed in the way that Daniel played, but I know his coaches and his coaches are brilliant. And this kind of irked Negreanu. It rubbed him the wrong way. Because what is he saying here? He's saying that he was disappointed in the way Daniel played. He thinks Daniel played poorly, despite having good coaches. Now, I don't know much about Negreanu's coaches. They apparently had some program that was supposed to teach GTO. Who knows? But they're saying that Daniel couldn't get it. Or Hellmuth is saying that Daniel couldn't get it. And then, what's also kind of interesting is that when Daniel tried to ask, what did you think I did poorly? Phil didn't know. Why did you not know? Because he later said that he didn't watch a single hand of the match. So he was disappointed in the way that Daniel played, but he didn't watch a single hand in the match. Turns out everything he learned was from secondhand knowledge from Mike Matusow and whatever hands he observed, which is probably not the best way to go about forming your own opinions. So, what is Phil doing here? Well, after hearing this feedback, Negreanu publicly tweeted a heads-up challenge to Phil Hellmuth, saying, live, online, any stakes you feel comfortable for as many hands as you'd like. You want to play big guy? And Hellmuth said, sure. And so they're going to be playing a match live in the PokerGO studios on March 16th, 2021 as part of the High Stakes Duel series. So what are the High Stakes Duel rules? Bit of a tongue twister here. High Stakes Duel rules. Well, they're slightly convoluted, but not actually all that difficult once you know what's going on. So, step number one, each player posts $50,000 for a total prize pool of $100,000. So buy-in for round one, what these two players are doing is they are each putting up $50,000. So we're playing a $50,000 buy-in, sit and go, heads up, sit and go. Fine. If someone loses, and someone will lose, that player can play the next round by matching the current prize pool within 3 days of losing, so they have to move this along. So essentially, say Phil Hellmuth wins. If Daniel wants to play again, now he has to put up $100,000 to play. So Hellmuth's going to have his 50K and Negreanu's 50K, and then Negreanu would have to put up 100,000. So it's basically matching the buy-in, right? And they can do this over and over. If the loser finally taps out and says, no, I don't want to play anymore, if no one comes forward to challenge whoever the winner is, within 30 days, the winner can cash out and move on with their life. However, there's also another mechanism where you can cash out, and that is if the winning player wins 3 consecutive times in a row. And you may say, that's probably pretty hard to happen, right? Well, there's only been one other high-stakes duel between Phil Hellmuth and Antonio Esfandiari, and Phil Hellmuth won 3 games in a row in a pretty convincing fashion. He scoop-looped all the money, cashed out, and that's where we are today. So we have Phil Hellmuth getting in there, battling it out, going 3-0 so far, which is actually pretty impressive. If a winning streak starts during round 4 or later, they can cash out after 2 consecutive wins, and that's because the prize pool would be substantially bigger. But right now we're starting at step 1. We are playing 1 heads-up, sit-and-go, $50,000 buy-in. With this structure, I'm presuming, this is the structure that they had for the Antonio versus Hellmuth match. They started with 300 big blinds, which is really deep stacked. But the blinds went up every 20 minutes, so stacks inevitably get shallow eventually. And, while you do play a little bit faster heads up than you do at a 9-handed table, you still don't get to play a ton of hands per hour. And that results in this kind of being a somewhat turbo-y game where each individual sit and go may only last 100 to maybe 300 hands, give or take a little bit. And that results in there being a ton of variance. There are betting lines on this. Currently, PokerShares has some betting lines. This is a site where you can bet on things like poker and politics. They do not accept Americans as far as I know, so if you're an American, you can't get in on this action. But here are the current betting lines. And I want to make it clear. I think that both Daniel Negreanu and Phil Hellmuth are absolute world-class poker players. They are masters in multi-table tournaments and live poker, and they are crushers. I like both of them, but I have to make a pick here. So I'm going to do my best to be incredibly analytical about this. I also want to make it clear I did bet on Daniel Negreanu in the Negreanu versus Doug Polk match. And looking back at it, I think the bet was reasonable. You got very good odds to bet on Negreanu because he was obviously the underdog against a high-stakes heads-up regular whenever he had never played the game before. And I think he actually played reasonably well in that match against Doug Polk. You can watch lots and lots of analysis of hands that I did over the course of that 25,000 hand battle at youtube.com/pokercoaching. I went through a bunch of hands using the GTO solver, and it turns out Negreanu played pretty well. Okay, however, it's important to know that that was a different structure, right? The Negreanu versus Polk match was played almost entirely deep stacked. In fact, I think the least amount of chips anyone ever had was 100 big blinds, and sometimes it got very deep. That's very different than this match, where this is starting off very deep stacked, but it's going to inevitably get somewhat shallow, okay? So we have this betting line. For those unfamiliar with reading betting lines, I like this type. This is called American odds over here. What this means, minus 159. Minus 159 means that if you want to bet on Negreanu to win, you have to put up $159 to win $100 from your opponent. So essentially the way you'd figure out how often you need to win, you take 159 divided by the total prize pool, which would be your 159 and the sportsbook's 100. So that's 259. 159 divided by 259 is 61.3% of the time. So if you think Negreanu is going to win more than 61.4% of the time, then you should be betting on Negreanu. Okay? Now, on the other side of the equation, we have plus 136. That means you're betting 100 to try to win 136. So you do 100 divided by 236 equals. So if you think Hellmuth is going to win more than 43% of the time, then you should be betting on Hellmuth. And there's a little bit of a house edge built in here so that the casino makes money. And that's how it goes. Essentially, though, if you think either of these things are true, either of those two things I just said, then you should make a bet on that player. And you can approach this a few different ways. First things first, you can look at regular poker variance for normal play, no payout structure, no decreasing stack depths. But let's assume, just very briefly, let's just look at some analytics, or some rough math. Let's assume that Negreanu, who is perceived to be the favorite, has a 10 big blind per 100 win rate, which is pretty big. Not gigantic, but pretty sizable. In this scenario, over the course of 200 hands, Negreanu is only going to be up about 100% minus this number, which would be about 55% of the time. That's not a lot, right? 55% of the time, Negreanu is going to be up if they were playing like 100 big blind cash game. Now, obviously, that's not exactly what we're doing. We are playing this structure where someone is going to get shallow and get stacked inevitably. If Negreanu has a gigantic win rate, like if Hellmuth's just the worst heads-up player in the world, which he's clearly not, in that scenario, you see that Negreanu is only going to lose 36% of the time, which means he's going to win 64% of the time. Okay? So that's worth noting. It's also worth noting that I played a ton of high-stakes heads-up sit-and-goes online. Back when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, I was a regular in the $500 to $2,000 buy-in heads-up sit-and-goes. And a very good win rate in those games was something like 10% return on investment. That was like really, really good. But essentially what that means is you are getting back 1.1 buy-ins out of the 2 buy-in total prize pool, which means you're going to win about 55% of the time if you're really good. Now, the games I was playing back then were more turbo-y than this structure, But the thing is even if you have like a really good ROI, let's say 20% ROI, 1.2 divided by 2 equals, you still see you only win 60% of the time, right? And I don't know if Negreanu is going to be able to win that often. I just don't know if it's possible because of the Turbo E structure of this match. Now, the only way, in reality, I think Negreanu can have such a high win rate is if he thinks Hellmuth is going to be so weak, so tight, so passive to the point that he essentially can blind him out. If he thinks he can slowly blind out Hellmuth to the point that Hellmuth never has a chance to get it all in and get a double up, or get it in with a reasonable amount of equity for a lot of chips, then you can have a pretty high win rate. But Phil Hellmuth's a good poker player, okay? He's played plenty of heads up in his life, and he's also played plenty of these kind of turbo-y heads up, sit and go type games. And that's going to result in, I think, this being a relatively close fight. Do I think there's any value in this betting line here? I think there's a little bit too much rake built in here. But if I could get something like plus 145 on Hellmuth, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable bet. It is worth noting that Daniel said in an interview that he thinks that he is a 2 to 2.5 to 1 favorite in this matchup.
Phil does a good job of kind of avoiding situations typically where he's going to be really, really exposed, because deep stack play is not going to be his forte. He makes the most of his mistakes come deep stack. He can't win. Like, so the way that I foresee the match actually going is I'll build up a lead, and the only way that he'll be able to win is if near the end when we're short stacked, he wins a few all-ins. But I don't see much of a chance for him winning. I would say with as many chips as we have, I would make myself like 2.5, like between 2.5 to 1 favorite.
And I just don't think it's true. There's not enough time, man. If we were playing a longer match, like let's say we were playing even a 1,000-hand match or a 5,000-hand match, then sure, I actually would think that. If we were playing the same structure that Negreanu had been studying a ton against Doug Polk, sure, I definitely think that could be the case. But as stacks get shallower, strategies generally do change. If Negreanu somehow knows that he has some sick live read on Hellmuth, or if he knows that Hellmuth has nothing on Negreanu, then, maybe, sure. But the thing is like, if you just get someone playing a heads-up game and they just put their money in reasonably well, they're still going to win 40% of the time. It's hard to not win 40% of the time when you are playing a heads-up game, and, Hellmuth is clearly pretty great at poker. So I definitely think Negreanu is the favorite to win this game. Hellmuth may take offense to that, sorry. But I think given these betting lines, I think you got to give a little bit of the edge to Hellmuth in this scenario. That said, I'm probably going to have no money bet on this, so take that for what it's worth. Also, the duel continues. They were discussing various terms and conditions and bantering back and forth, and they came up with another bet that was offered and accepted. Negreanu is laying $400,000 to Phil Hellmuth's $200,000 that over 50 $25,000 buy-in tournaments at Aria, that Hellmuth will end up in the red, which means down. If he shows $1 profit, he wins the bet. It's pretty aggressive. That's basically saying that over the course of 50 tournaments, I think you're going to be down. And, interestingly enough, in tournaments, you usually are down. I actually like Negreanu's side in this scenario. Notice he had to give some odds, right? He had to bet 2 units to try to win 1 unit. But the way tournament results typically happen is you trickle down, down, then you have a spike. Down, then you have a spike. And he's basically saying that I don't think Phil's going to have more than 2 wins or 1 or 2 wins in small field tournaments over the course of a small sample, right? And I mean, let's get real. In those games are very tough. They're usually small field events featuring many of the absolute best players in the world plus 1 or 2 recreational players. And the thing is that even if Hellmuth has a tiny return on investment or small return on investment in these games, which he could, he's just going to be down after 50 tournaments most of the time because that's how tournament variance works out. So interesting bet. I'm excited to see how that plays out. It's going to take forever, I'm sure. I also would have liked to qualify this a little bit better. I don't know what 25K buy-in means. Does this mean 25K average buy-in? Does it mean 10Ks to 100Ks? Because there actually are a lot of $10,000 tournaments that take place in Aria on a regular basis. And, they have a spread of buy-ins. It's like between 10 and 100. So if he could play the 10K buy-ins as well, that would make this bet get resolved much faster. That said, obviously Negreanu wants the buy-in to be as high as possible because those are going to be the tougher tournaments. And then Arclegger here says, how many 25K buy-ins actually are there? And then he says, I'm pretty sure there'll be as many as Phil Hellmuth wants to play. Essentially meaning that Negreanu thinks that if Phil shows up to play, he wants to play 25K, there'll be a line out the door to play with him. Funny enough, if there actually is a line out the door to play with him, that may actually increase his return on investment, which is kind of interesting to think. And if the fields start getting really big, because imagine it's normally the best players in the world and a few recreational players. Imagine Hellmuth shows up, and now a bunch of pros show up who have a tiny edge or break-even edge. Maybe they think they have an edge, but they don't. Now, more of the pros who may normally not, like the best pros, who may not live in Vegas, who may not travel to play these, maybe they start coming in. Field gets bigger, prize pool gets bigger, more recreational players come. Next thing you know, they're having 100-person 25Ks every day. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could happen, and if that's the case, then all Hellmuth has to do is spike one tournament, and he very easily could win the bet. So that's pretty interesting to see. Anyway, this is a lot of fun. I'm excited to see how this plays out. I will be reviewing lots of hands from this high-stakes heads-up battle between these two titans of poker. I'm looking forward to that. Negreanu's already publicly stated his strategy before the flop, which is pretty cool. It's very similar to the heads-up charts we have available for you for free at pokercoaching.com/HUNL. So if you want to see the strategy Negreanu's probably going to be using, make sure you check that out. Hellmuth said that he thought that Negreanu was supposed to be playing 100% of buttons, or he thought that Negreanu thought he was supposed to be playing 100% of buttons. That's not true. You do not get to play every hand heads up. Anyway, check that out, pokercoaching.com/HUNL. I'm excited for the battle. Are you? If you are, I want you to write in the comment section below who you think is going to win. Is it going to be Negreanu or is it going to be Hellmuth? My pick is Negreanu's going to win. But if I had to make a bet at the betting lines that we showed earlier, I think I'd have to put my money on Hellmuth. That's how the math works. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor, click the like and subscribe button below. If you want to see more poker news content from me, let me know. I'm happy to do this type of thing every once in a while. Lots of action happening in the poker world at the moment. Everyone's stuck at home. They're ready to get out. They're ready to battle. And I'll be here to cover it for you. Make sure you check back to this channel for lots of updates where I'll be going through the hands that these two players play. And I hope you have a great week. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Thank you very much for being here. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.